carcinogenic. Holy crow. That's not what I say. I say, holy shit. And there's a company in this world that sells the stuff, and another company that licenses it, and every
is to fortify people with information and fortify them and hearten them to make the changes that we need to make, because I believe that we can make them. Look how much things have changed.
Situations around you read tends to really when losing health. It's fine, but you know the story with it, so at least it's a conscious of how
is that being, and I guess,
and we'll start from there. If each of you could give us a short opening statement.
I guess I'm the closest, and my first admission is that despite the gray hair, I have not spent
Opening statement.
I guess I'm the closest, and my first admission is that despite the gray hair, I have not spent hundreds of years studying this topic. Thousands, maybe. So, again, a second admission is that I have really not spent a lot of time studying pollutants. My interest is in studying the chemistry of water and what we can really understand about water, and some of the things that we've discovered are quite different from what you may read in the textbook. And I guess perhaps my contribution here is that some of the aspects of what we learn could be helpful, useful, and in perhaps cleaning up some of the pollutants, and I can talk about that later. But I guess I must admit that I've been in the same situation as you are, with various family members feeling differently about the subject, and that fuels lots of debates. But I'm certainly on your side. The pollutants are horrific in our environment, and we obviously need to do something serious to ameliorate the situation.
My interest in pollution goes back to starting a master's degree in pollution in London in the 1970s, and that was in response to getting involved with the anti-nuclear campaign. In those days, people were anti-nuclear bomb, but they were okay about peaceful use of the atom. That changed. And during that time, I read The Limits to Growth, and I was struck by that. And Guy the other day mentioned a critical sentence there, that you can't have infinite growth against finite resources. It's just a matter of time. And I was lucky at that time to meet E.F. Schumacher, the author of one of the best books on the environment. Small is Beautiful. The pollutant I chose to study in the master's degree in London was lead. And one of the things which was striking about that was the way that Bryce Smith, an organic chemist at Reading University, was unmercifully attacked by the gasoline industry and the paint industry for what he said about lead. He was making rather innocent comments about you should not use lead in solder for babies' food. But he was attacked, and I was a scientist then. I thought I was a scientist, and I was absolutely shocked at the way they went after this person. Now it's kind of standard fare to see honest people attacked. And before I go any further, I want to thank Steve for organizing this conference so well and so comprehensively. And for giving us time that we don't normally get. Oh, we've got 3 minutes left. Steve has 3 attributes which I think are common to most of the people I like. And that is, he has an open mind, he has an open heart, and he has integrity. And we must never lose those. And I remember my Latin teacher at grammar school growing up in England. He said, the best definition of an educated person is someone who can entertain his or herself, entertain a friend, and entertain a new idea. And the kicker is in that last one. And what that tells you is that there are very, very bright people at universities who are not educated. And it also tells you there are many citizens out there that haven't got high degrees who are highly educated, which is one of my themes. I think the only hope for the future of this planet and the health of us on this planet is the grassroots. And fortunately, we have internet today, so we can talk to each other. Grassroots activists in different countries can talk to each other, and this saves a lot of time in reinventing the wheel in how we progress. The other thing I've learned, unfortunately, is that too many regulatory agencies are working for the other side. The FDA, the EPA, the CDC, and so on, and that's a shocker to me. I don't think that any civil servant should spin. That's not their job. Their job is to give objective information to the decision maker. Any spinning, let it be the politicians, not the civil servants. So I've had interest in lead, interest in mercury, interest in aluminium. It is aluminium, by the way. You're not aluminum. Alcoa made a spelling mistake in the early 1900s, and rather than waste 20,000 pieces of paper, that spelling mistake has now infiltrated the whole of the American empire. I'm also interested, thanks to my wife, in 1996 with fluoride, and there are many things about fluoride that will shock you. Most people don't want to know. And there's a pesticide containing fluoride which is particularly pernicious, and that's sulfuryl fluoride, which is a fumigant on food. And because of my involvement with incineration, I'm particularly concerned about dioxins, endocrine disruptors, and the last horrible aspect of incineration. Thank goodness we don't have too many. Most of them are in Florida. Too many in the United States. We stopped over 300 being built between 85 and 95. They've only built one since 1997 in the United States. But the latest wrinkle on the pollution from incineration is that it produces and releases nanoparticles. Many combustion sources release nanoparticles. The trouble with incineration is that those nanoparticles are the most toxic of all the nanoparticles that we're able to make in diesel trucks and so on. So those are some of my interests in pollutants.
Stephen started out correctly that many of you, even sitting in this room as well as watching us worldwide, easily can throw your hands up and say this is overwhelming, that you just want to live your life. Well, I'm here to say that you cannot live your life. You cannot have freedom. You cannot expect to live to a ripe old age and to be with your loved ones if you don't start to look at the corruption that we call modern society. We no longer have the privilege to avoid this or not to address it. You would expect, as my colleague just said, that government organizations worldwide that were sworn to protect the good of the citizenship would do it, but they're not only not doing it, but as so well articulated a minute ago, they're part of the problem. They're hiding the problems, they're lying to you, they're deceiving you, and by the way, that's why it has gotten as bad as it is today. Somehow along the way, when I was probably 30 years old, I realized that there were a lot of stones not turned. Even in the natural health field, there is a whole lot of nonsense that goes on in the natural health field. So I started to turn some uncomfortable stones. And even things that you and I would suspect are healthy for us, like supplements. You may read about this in my book, Supplements Exposed. 91% are dangerous, are deadly chemicals, and will hurt you and destroy your health and weaken your immune system. Anna Maria, as Stephen told you, and I wrote a book. Why? Not because we're experts in the garment industry, we're not. But because nobody ever wrote the book and told the public that the clothes you wear are deadly. 2000, listen closely, the average piece of clothing that you're listening to us now, probably adorning your body with, has been made with 2,000 2,000 chemicals. 2,000 chemicals. Dr. Pollack, who I think is the most brilliant man that has ever been in the world of science in the area of water, I'm sure we'll speak later, but when I speak to marine biologists, oceanographic scientists, when I wrote a book called Killer Fish, I was stunned to find out that they told me there's not a drop of drinking water on the planet Earth, be it the North Pole or South Pole, that doesn't have some level of pharmaceutical drugs in it and plastics because of something called rain. And it universally spreads all over the world and gets into our aquifers. And then the intentional chemicals that are literally placed into foods and so-called pesticides and fungicides and herbicides is so bizarre that you and I today take this for granted, and we have to actually spend more money. We have to go and buy ecological, biological, and organic food, spend more money not to be poisoned. And once again, it's an elitist idea. Thank God I have the money and the knowledge to do that. But how about the population that doesn't have that? So once again, bad on them. So this is an overwhelming problem. And any of you listening that are on the fence, get off the fence, because you're not going to take responsibility. Changes won't come. And if you're so lethargic and apathetic that you don't care about yourself, think about your children, your grandchildren, and future generations.
You know, you really think that somebody's looking after you and looking after the food and your water and the water you get in your tap. And yes, you are being looked after by a vicious organization. It's called Codex Alimentarius. And they were supposed to set the standard. They started really together with World Health Organization and United Nations and agricultural groups in the early 1960s, and they were setting standards for the whole globe. And they are letting us use in agriculture and in all our foods. They are letting us use some of the worst chemicals known to man. It's in our foods. So, you know, it's very close to our heart because these chemicals causes changes in DNA. And it's not something you can see right away, so it could get into generations. And it could happen maybe years after a child is born, something that the mother got or something that the mother was close to. For example, if a husband is working with DDT, and he comes home, he gives that to his wife. And if she's pregnant, she will actually give that to her unborn child. And that child, maybe years later, will have cancer. So, you know, it's very close to us because we deal with children. Families come through our institute and, you know, learn about lifestyle. They learn about how they can cleanse, how they can change their system, and they can rebuild their whole immune system, because especially a child that's still, you know, growing and changing their central nervous system, and everything is just growing in their body. They are so much more sensitive than the adults are. And you know, if we want to have a generation that's going to be healthy, and if we want to conquer diseases, obesity, if we want to conquer diabetes, if we want to conquer cancer, we all have to work together, and we have to say no to standard rules that Codex have. Because, you know, I'm from Sweden, I'm European, and it is heartbreaking to see how it's stopping especially people that are in this field and working with organic farming. What is organic farming? It's been watered down so much now that really anything can be called organic. So we have a lot to do, and the problem is that Codex is above your country's laws. So they are above what your Senate and Congress. So they're more or less just following what the laws are, what the standard is, and it's horrendous. It is really scary the more you get into it, and I think it was coming above our heads, most of us, and pretty late, because it's been years that it's been in working.
So I am a filmmaker, and what I do is take a massive amount of information and distill it into a film that just regular people can understand. I talk to scientists and people who are experts in their field and make that information available to people, because I think it is possible for us to change. I think it's all going to come from grassroots. I agree about that. But it also has to be top down, because we can do all the things we want to do, but if we're not protected by our government from these chemicals and toxins that are in the air and the water and the soil, we're going to get them. One of the reasons I made a film about GMOs was I realized that my philosophy, I was in college in the late 60s, and I was kind of a dropout. I figured you could drop out of the sort of toxic dominant culture and create your own separate culture, and that doesn't really work that well. But what I realized with GMOs is they will come and get you. You know, you have an organic farm and someone sets up a chemical farm next to you. Chemical drift can come over, GMO pollen can come over, and basically you've lost what you wanted to create. So that's what I've done. And I'm working on a project now about 24 of the pioneering organic farmers in Canada who started farming in the 60s and early 70s. And every single one of them was passionate about organic farming and not using chemicals and going back to more traditional methods, but also updating them with current information. Every single one of them was told by the experts at the time, the state universities, the land-grant universities, that they could never grow commercially organically. It would never happen. You couldn't do it, give up, don't even bother. And of course, every single one of them and tens of thousands of other organic farmers said, we can do it. They are doing it, and now they're the fastest growing part of the food industry. So it is possible to change, but I think that we have to gain political power. And I know now that seems like a kind of sort of a hopeless thing because our government is so controlled by corporations, but I think that we have to have such a strong grassroots movement that the people in power have to give way. And I think that that's the way it has to be. Otherwise, they're just going to contaminate us out of existence. So that's what I think. And it's, you know, there are tens of thousands of agricultural chemicals that are used now. Most of them haven't been even tested. They were grandfathered in. So I think that even starting with the food we eat, I actually think, I'll say this here, it's going out to the world, I think that the kind of food that a lot of Americans eat actually makes them stupid. I really do. And I see it, and I just think, you know, they're not feeling well, you know, they're actually, if you eat certain kinds of bad fats, your brain doesn't work. The electrical energy doesn't go from one synapse to the next synapse. You're actually deadening your brain. So I know I'm sort of food obsessed and I'm an organic fanatic and all that sort of thing. And I'm also, you know, yeah, I'm hungry for change. But I also feel that we have to let people know, and we have to let people know when we go in their houses. I mean, some of my friends, you know, you go, really? Really, you have this? You know, you have this in your kitchen? You're using Raid? I mean, think about what you're using here. You know, and it makes you the dinner guest from hell. You know, it's like, what are you? But I think we can change it, and in my work, what I try to do is to fortify people with information, and fortify them and hearten them to make the changes that we need to make, because I believe that we can make them. Look how much things have changed in just the past 20 years. Just look at that. Look what's popular. Look what's cool now. It's totally different than what it was 20 or 30 years ago. So I think it's possible, and it's great to be here with like-minded people. Thank you.
And we were so close with Bernie. We were so close, which is an indication, I might add, of how close we would possibly be. You know, he's not the only one out there. But in any case, and when you think about what people eat, and you see that picture of Donald Trump sitting there in front of the McDonald's burger on his jet, makes you want to throw up yourself. I'm really not worthy of being up here. I thought I was here just for the humor. And you know, when you look at the top, what I do is I write books about the science behind gardening, because I was curious about organic gardening when someone challenged me, and so I wrote a book that describes the science behind organic gardening so that I could understand why I should be an organic gardener. I needed to learn about the science. The second book I wrote was, about how plants eat, because I was curious about how they eat. There are all these myths. You feed them fertilizer and you do this and that, but what's the science behind it? How do plants take in food? And then this third book I wrote, about a particular kind of fungi, which basically are responsible for life on Earth, and nobody ever heard about them before. And what I do is I just take my average mind and I try to find enough science out there where I can finally recognize the words and then translate them down like you do with your films, so that, I can understand what's going on and then maybe use some of the stuff. And so that's what I do. I'm struck as an average guy about a couple of things. So I walk around Safeway. I live in Anchorage, Alaska. We have Safeway. Safeway has their own organic brand, but they don't sell any organic meat at this Safeway. And so I walk up to the manager and I say, "Excuse me, I just have one simple question. Do you think I only want some of my food to be organic?" He thinks about it, and of course, it's a pretty compelling argument. Why are you bragging about organic and not? And so he goes up the line, and now we've got a little bit of organic, and I have to go and buy it all because I think I'm the only one who can afford the meat up there because you're all buying my books. But in any case, it's sort of that kind of stuff, and then you think about a UN report coming out that says Roundup is possibly carcinogenic. And I'm just an average guy, right? I read that, and it says possibly carcinogenic. First of all, I know it's the United Nations, it's watered down, it's been influenced, it's been beaten up, it's been possibly carcinogenic. Holy crow. That's not what I say. I say, holy shit. And there's a company in this world that sells the stuff, and another company that licenses it. And every spring, there's a Scottish guy that comes on TV and yells at me that I need to buy it. And it's possibly carcinogenic. I know it. Everybody knows it. Come on, everybody knows it. And you can't tell me that the people who make it don't know it. And there it is. But there's Bernie. Well, we all got behind him and gave away to those people that were concerned about this stuff, because there is a possibility for change. And if we don't have that possibility for change, then we are stuck in 1984. We went by 1984, but we're in 1984 pretty close. So we got to be careful. And then, of course, I take a look at, things like dandelions. Everybody hates dandelions. I always say if they came in different colors, people would love them. But everybody wants to kill their dandelions, right? And so they spray them. You spray anything outdoors, and someone 50 miles away is impacted by the spray drift. 50 miles away. I live in Alaska. Pretty pristine place. I mean, we've got some crazy politicians. Yeah. Pretty pristine place. And the Alaska Railroad is the only railroad in the entire state. You take Alaska, it's 1/5 the size of the United States, goes from Seattle down to Miami here. The railroad decides it needs to spray Roundup to kill the weeds. 50 miles up and down the entire railroad system. Whether you like it or not, every salmon stream, anything. Oh, we're not spraying near this. We stop when we get to the streams and go across the bridge, and then we start again. 70 miles with the drift. It's crazy. I'm just an average guy up here. These people are scientists and real communicators who've got United Nations credentials and everything else. I'm just an average guy, and I'm listening to them, and I'm believing them, most of what they say. I don't have to believe everything they say, but I know one thing. We all need to be saying, holy shit, why are we letting them do this to us? And there's many things I could talk about, but we're going worldwide. I don't want my, brothers and whatnot to hear me say some of these things, but there are lots of things we could be talking about where we have been put into the little spot of 1984 slaves, and we better fight it or we're screwed. And we better start screaming holy shit an awful lot and doing something about it and talking to each other about it like we are now. So thank you.
What are the first 5 recommendations you would make for someone that wants to stay healthy and keep their family healthy, and you don't have a lot of time, so you want to be direct and say, so if there's a list of 100 things, what's the top 5 that you want to make sure? If you have a 1-minute phone call with your family member and they go, tell me the 5 most important things I can do to avoid chemicals, pesticides, toxins, or any radiation or any kind of exposure that's harmful to me. What are your first 5 suggestions? Assuming there's more, but what would be the first 5 you would make?
Kill yourself. Kill everybody around you. I mean, a lot, and doing something about it and talking to each other about it like we are now. So thank you.
What are the first 5 recommendations you would make for someone that wants to stay healthy and keep their family healthy, and you don't have a lot of time, so you want to be direct and say, so if there's a list of 100 things, what's the top 5 that you want to make sure? If you have a 1-minute phone call with your family member and they go, tell me the 5 most important things I can do to avoid chemicals, pesticides, toxins, or any radiation or any kind of exposure that's harmful to me. What are your first 5 suggestions? Assuming there's more, but what would be the first 5 you would make?
Kill yourself. Kill everybody around you. I mean, you can't avoid this stuff. How many people here ate at the restaurant today? I ate there today because it was raining like crazy. Was it organic? I have no idea, but I bet you it wasn't. Wait a minute. I know it wasn't. Holy shit, of course it wasn't. So what do? You try to eat organic. You try to only breathe fresh air. You wash your hands whenever you possibly can. You be pleasant to everybody around you, because mood means things. And from my perspective, you don't do anything harmful to the soil.
Well, that's good. I also say eat organically. Be very careful about the clothes that you wear. They're now more and more organic cotton. It's more expensive, but that's something we should try to do. I think it's important to be politically active and make the communities we live in know that we don't want Roundup or these chemicals sprayed on schoolyards or parks or streets where people walk, and just protest and be a huge pain in the ass until they do something about it. I also think one thing that I'm aware of because of my work is there's a thing called biosolids, and it's what is left over after they take the water out of sewage sludge. Because the Clean Water Act was passed, and they compromised, and they said the water would be really clean and everything would be left in the sludge. Now, it's toxic if they put it in a toxic waste dump. I mean, if they tried to get rid of it, it would be called a toxin, and they would have to go through all kinds of things in order to get rid of it. But if you put it into a bag of compost, it's no longer waste, so it doesn't have to be labeled toxic waste. So you can actually call it organic. You can call it organic because when the organic standards were passed, it got grandfathered in. So the companies that do this, it's called biosolids. It's very expensive to get rid of that stuff if you're trying to landfill it or whatever. So there are municipalities that sell it, that give it away to compost companies so that they can get rid of it rather than go to the expense of trying to get rid of it some healthier way. So they put it, and they actually give it away, and they give it away to school gardens. And so what you need to do if you're buying bags of compost is look, even if it's labeled organic, you need to read through the ingredients, and if it says biosolids, you need to not only get rid of it, but see if there's schools where you're living that are using that because they're being given it by the compost companies. How lovely. So avoid biosolids or organic compost that contain in the ingredients biosolids. And I think supporting local farmers and farmers that grow organically is a good thing, because the more power we have, the more money that is spent in a certain industry, the more heft we'll have when it comes to passing laws that will protect us from these things.
I would say, if it's my family, I would say, if you have kids, I want you to make sure all your household products, all the chemicals and pesticides you have in the house, let's change it to biodegradable products. And there are a lot of companies out there that has great products, so you don't mess up the environment just by doing that. And I learned, I'm brought up outside Stockholm on a peninsula, and we have our own water, we have our own sewer, and one day my mother got chlorine flushers for the toilets. And where the sewer water would come out, it always grew plants and grasses, even through winter and snow. And now with the chlorine flushers, everything died. It just became a filthy mush. And we wondered, what did we do different? And it was these toilet flushers. And when you live in a city, you don't see what you are doing, what change you make when you have chemicals in your household. So, your water is everybody's water, your sewer water is everybody's sewer water. So you don't see the difference. So that was a great lesson for me, that everything you do matters. Everything. And you could be the example to start using better products. So, I would say pack your own lunch. Pack your own lunch so you don't depend on other people. And of course, we're so much into live food and sprouting, so starting an organic seed and then growing your own food as much as you can. I mean, that's amazing to bring to lunch. And go organic and go vegan, I mean, it's not sustainable to eat meat. It's going to be something that we absolutely can't have. And, for your health and for your sanity, like you said, I mean, we're really being dummified. We're being fed tons of high fructose corn syrup. And do you know now that it doesn't say high fructose corn syrup on the stuff anymore? It will say fructose or fructose syrup. So they know that because of Dr. Seneff at MIT, she really proved for us that it is totally connected with autism. And not only that, diabetes and obesity. So when they do research with rats with high fructose corn syrup, they all become fat. They all go obese. So I would say that, and the clothes that we wear, of course, I've been working on organic cotton bras for 15 years because so many women come with breast cancer to our institute, and I just wanted them to have available something that was absolutely right for them. And talked about Victoria's Secret the other day. It's for men to buy for their wives. It's not the women that really buys them, it's men buys it for their wives to be pretty. It has nothing to do with health, and it's the opposite. It actually can increase the breast cancer risk 6 times with the polyester nylon, the underwear. So if underwire, if that's what you use, you burn that bra, okay? Don't burn, okay, don't burn. Cut it, cut it in pieces. Let it go into nature. It'll probably take, what do you think, 300 years for it to go down? Well, so we don't want it on our body at all. And what's the other 2? Did you guys get 5? So, I think, starting with what you have really close to your body, and anything from sports. Sports is amazing to wear organic underwear and organic sports clothes. You feel totally different. And you of course, if you have a newborn, you want to make sure that they don't inhale any of the bad chemicals. We put fire retardants in newborns' pajamas. Yeah, pajamas, and they sleep in that. And guess what? The urine the next day has the fire retardant.
Don't wait until you think you're good enough or smart enough. Use Google. Seriously though, the animal good enough or smart enough. Use Google. Seriously though, the animals can use every single voice that's willing to speak up. Do you think a veal calf trapped in his cell, unable to move and scheduled for slaughter in a number of hours, cares whether you say the perfect words, or if your hair looks good, or if you know how to confidently field any question you receive, or if you feel that you're not thin enough or smart enough or confident enough to speak out about veganism? No. He just knows he is suffering and terrified, and he needs freedom. And I'm pretty damn sure that he'd take it by any means. So get out there and find your voice, your version of activism. It may look completely different from anything that I or anyone else has ever done, and that's awesome. And hey, if you do feel that you need some help getting started, I do offer one-on-one coaching to help guide you through the process of finding your individual form of effective activism. And if you want to go the YouTube route, which I think has great potential, I also offer YouTube coaching for building an effective channel from the ground up. You can get more info about those on the Work With Me page at bitesizevegan.com, and I'll also link to it in the video description below. But whether it's
Alright, let's go. That's the last second. Last second. Yes. Yes. Everyone to answer before shutting it down? Again! Everyone sit behind. Okay, don't fuck yourself.
video, lecturing, painting, interpretive dance, whatever. Start educating. Start speaking up. Take advantage of the little opportunities in everyday life to speak up for the animals. We need you. They need you. And you can make a difference. So if you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up and share it around to show everyone that they too can make a difference. If you're new here, I don't normally deliver my videos in spandex. I'm not sure if that's a disappointment or relief. But either way, do hit that big red subscribe button down there for more awesome vegan content every Monday, Wednesday, and some Fridays. I would love to have you as a subscriber. If you want to help Bite Size Vegan keep educating and spreading the vegan message, check out either of the support links in the video description below. And if you want to get perks and rewards for your support, you can click on the Nugget Army icon over there or the link down below for more information. Now go live vegan, get active, and I'll see you soon. Troy an Australian accent. Nope. No. These aren't even spandex. These are actually long johns.
So when you buy, you have to go organic. Absolutely. And hopefully you understand about diapers, because kids are going to have diapers the first 2 years of their life, and they're going to inhale all these chemicals that normal diapers have that you buy. And it just takes you, it just opens your eyes. Like, I can't even just go and buy diapers. I have to look for diapers that either are chlorine-free and chemical-free, or I go back to what my mother did. We had cotton diapers and wool covers. That's what we did, and it's nothing to it. And because we have washing machines, your mother always told me she had a pot on the stove and it was cooking your diapers. So, oh my God. So here you go.
When we think about how to get rid of poisons in our life, I prioritize this in a way, how quickly will we die if we don't address this issue? So we start with oxygen. Every environmental protection agency, I read 17 countries, tell us that inside of a home or an apartment is between 6 and 7 times more polluted than outside, even if you live in Los Angeles or Paris, a highly polluted city. So you must either get an appropriate, proper air filtration system, and most of them on the market, including expensive ones, are a farce. They don't work. You must also open your windows and breathe fresh air 12 months a year, wherever you choose to live, be it hot or be it cold. When you drive your automobile, you should crack your window. Even a Bentley or a Rolls-Royce has fumes that go inside of the carriage. And so number one is oxygen. And that's what you do for that. Number 2 is water. This has become an abundantly clear subject to me, since all water, as I mentioned previously, is polluted, and they intentionally put fluoride as well as chlorine, which both kill you, alter the brain, alter the nervous system, and also give you cancer. These are not opinions. These are not holistic facts or New Age rhetoric. This is the most cutting edge and absolutely empirically proven science that we can speak about today. So you must get water to a distilled level, something that's that pure. Rainwater without pollutants in it is like distilled water. And Dr. Pollack will address this even more than I will, I'm sure. Number 3 is food. And if you're not a plant-based eater today, you're part of the problem. What we do know scientifically is where most chemicals, most heavy metals reside is in fat. And so that's animal fat. And we'll start with fish. We'll go to little chickens and turkey. We'll go to pork, which even the Bible wrote about, and that was several, hundreds of years ago, or thousands, a couple of thousand years ago. And we go to the red meat, the notorious one, and many of you listening say, well, I don't eat meat, I eat fish, and I eat pork, and it's all meat. That's meat. Eggs, by the way, are riddled with pollutants. Dairy food is maybe even more riddled with pollutants on an average than all meats. So if you want to be polluted, you want chemicals, continue to eat animal-based foods. The so-called organic meats are a farce, a complete fraud, a A book I'm starting in December will expose that, maybe clearer than people have in the past. It is all 100% a fraud. There's no such thing as organic meat. There's no such thing as a moral or merciful way to slaughter an animal and to eat it. There's no way that you can consume meat and not destroy the planet Earth that you're on. So now I've just talked about the plant-based consumption. Now we talk about growing food inside of your own home. We've been teaching that for 60 years successfully. And along the way, thank God, science taught us something we didn't even know. Why, since 1956, thousands and thousands of people like Anna Marie and I have successfully fought the aging process, and thousands more have reversed catastrophic disease, and tens of thousands more have prevented catastrophic disease, is because there's the most important medicine all of biology, all of science has ever discovered in raw plants and in the sprouts more than any raw plant. That, by the way, is an incredibly inexpensive way to get the most protein, the most vitamins, the most minerals, the most essential fat, and you can be sure it's organic because you're growing it in your kitchen window for pennies. So this is not an elitist idea like buying organic food at the Whole Food Market. This is something when I go proudly into ghettos around the world, I can teach. So growing your own food basically is good. Of course, lastly is to purchase organic food. Although it's flawed, at least they're attempting to not put the deadly chemicals on it at that point. And we have lobbyists in Washington and have for 10 years, and fought, and were successful. They wanted to actually mandate that eventually you would only buy genetically modified seeds. So far we've been successful in stopping that. I think in New Zealand they haven't, or they're trying to take that over at this point. We were not successful. Taking the one sentence out we worked for a couple of years on, where organic rules or organic laws will come from prevailing science. Prevailing science is not the legitimate Hippocrates Health Institute or Dr. Pollack at Washington State University, but Monsanto and DuPont, etc. So someday when you're sleeping and nobody's watching, as most people aren't, you're chopping away at your organic potato chips and organic soda, that basically they're going to make the rule go through and say it's perfectly fine to put genetically modified food into organics. Then we get to detoxification. Years ago, one of my close friends and colleagues did some research on hyperthermia, which has been widely used in countries like Germany to reverse viruses, bacterias, and cancers, with empirical data that's proven that it works. You just have to heat the body up a half a degree, it starts to reverse this. So 25 years ago, when he basically came to me in my office and said, we have shown that this works, but by the way, you don't have to go to a medical doctor and take anticonvulsion medicine and get your body heated up 6 degrees, get into an infrared sauna 20 to 30 minutes a day. If you have cancer, from 30 minutes to an hour a day, 7 days a week, and it's more effective than anything else. And by the way, it takes 87, write this down in your head, 87% more heavy metals, chemicals, and toxins out of your body than does a normal sauna or that basically they're going to make the rule go through and say it's perfectly fine to put genetically modified food into organics. Then we get to detoxification. Years ago, one of my close friends and colleagues did some research on hyperthermia, which has been widely used in countries like Germany to reverse viruses, bacterias, and cancers, with empirical data that's proven that it works. You just have to heat the body up a half a degree, it starts to reverse this. So 25 years ago, when he basically came to me in my office and said, we have shown that this works, but by the way, you don't have to go to a medical doctor and take anticonvulsion medicine and get your body heated up 6 degrees, get into an infrared sauna 20 to 30 minutes a day, and if you have cancer, from 30 minutes to an hour a day, 7 days a week, and it's more effective than anything else. And by the way, it takes 87, write this down in your head, 87% more heavy metals, chemicals, and toxins out of your body than does a normal sauna or a normal steam bath. So that's number 4 on the list. And number 5 is what, to reiterate what several people have said, in your house, your carpeting most likely is made of formaldehyde. Your paint, if you have an old house, is most likely lead. If not, you're lucky. But all the new paints, even at the large commercial shops today, globally, you can buy low toxic. There's no such thing as no toxic, unless you buy little pints from Germany. You know, like Liv, they make non-toxic. You could almost eat the stuff. Not that you would like to, unless you want to turn color. But bottom line is, you can do that, and from this point on, make those decisions. If you choose to continue to cook food, you know, get to the Italians. They make 100% stone cookware. Stone, because even stainless steel has nickel in it. That, by the way, destroy the eyes and the body and the neurological system. So find out these things. You know, don't let yourself say, well, let's go listen to the expert. Become the expert. You think I was an expert? When I was young, I was the poster child for what not to do. And so I had to become the expert by learning, just like you. You're not a scientist, but by the way, you probably are articulating and writing more than most scientists know who are in denial.
Well, I would start with just encouraging as many people to recognize that we live in two worlds. We have the real world and we have the world constructed by public relations companies in the service of corporations. Monsanto, GMOs is a classic example. I agree with everybody else. Eat organic or grow your own food. Here, I think a special plea, we need to consider how to get organic food to low-income families. One suggestion is, we know, going to my waste management hat, we know that reuse as opposed to recycling is high value, low volume. Recycling is high volume, low value. Reuse then creates jobs, creates businesses. So we need to more and more reuse and repair operations, which in turn will make money, and if it's done in low-income areas, that money can be used to subsidize organic food from local farms. First and second thing is, don't drink tap water with fluoride in it. That can be expensive. What my wife and I have done, we live in a fluoridated community, is we found a local spring. We go to that spring and fill up about 20 bottles, liter bottles, with spring water. So one thing you can do is to go on the internet. There are sites which tell you where the nearest spring is to your house, and that's a good investment. I mean, we went there on Sunday and we got 24 liter bottles. That saved us $24 going to the supermarket. Next thing is, if you don't have so-called silver fillings are mercury. They're 50% mercury. So make sure that your kids don't get mercury fillings. Unfortunately, low-income families are forced to have mercury fillings. And avoid the propaganda which says they're safe and effective, etc. Another thing to do with water, simple precaution, run the water for at least a minute in the morning. Don't drink water that stood in the pipes. You may or may not know whether they are lead. To consider how to get.
If you have an old house, it's most likely lead. If not, you're lucky. But all the new paints, even at the large commercial shops today, globally, you can buy low toxic. There's no such thing as no toxic, unless you buy little pints from Germany. You know, like Liv, they make non-toxic. You could almost eat the stuff. Not that you would like to, unless you want to turn color. But bottom line is, you can do that, and from this point on, make those decisions. If you choose to continue to cook food, you know, get to the Italians. They make 100% stone cookware. Stone, because even stainless steel has nickel in it. That, by the way, destroy the eyes and the body and the neurological system. So find out these things. You know, don't let yourself say, well, let's go listen to the expert. Become the expert. You think I was an expert? When I was young, I was the poster child for what not to do. And so I had to become the expert by learning, just like you. You're not a scientist, but by the way, you probably are articulating and writing more than most scientists know who are in denial.
I would start with just encouraging as many people to recognize that we live in two worlds. We have the real world and we have the world constructed by public relations companies in the service of corporations. Monsanto, GMOs is a classic example. I agree with everybody else. Eat organic or grow your own food. Here, I think a special plea, we need to consider how to get organic food to low-income families. One suggestion is, we know, going to my waste management hat, we know that reuse as opposed to recycling is high value, low volume. Recycling is high volume, low value. Reuse then creates jobs, creates businesses. So we need to more and more reuse and repair operations, which in turn will make money, and if it's done in low-income areas, that money can be used to subsidize organic food from local farms. First and second thing is don't drink tap water with fluoride in it. That can be expensive. What my wife and I have done, we live in a Florida community, is we found a local spring. We go to that spring and fill up about 20 bottles, a liter bottle, with spring water. So one thing you can do is to go on the internet. There are sites which tell you where the nearest spring is to your house. And that's a good investment. I mean, we went there on Sunday and we got 24 liter bottles. That saved us $24 going to the supermarket. Next thing is, if you don't have so-called silver fillings are mercury. They're 50% mercury. So make sure that your kids don't get mercury fillings. Unfortunately, low-income families are forced to have mercury fillings. And avoid the propaganda which says they're safe and effective, etc. Another thing to do with water. Simple precaution, run the water for at least a minute in the morning. Don't drink water that stood in the pipes. You may or may not know whether they are lead pipes somewhere. You may not know whether the joints contained lead soda or the brass fittings and so on. So run the water, count to 100, especially for young children. If you don't have so-called silver fillings are mercury. They're 50% mercury. So make sure that your kids don't get mercury fillings. Unfortunately, low-income families are forced to have mercury fillings. And avoid the propaganda which says they're safe and effective, etc. Another thing to do with water, simple precaution, run the water for at least a minute in the morning. Don't drink water that stood in the pipes. You may or may not know whether they are lead pipes somewhere. You may not know whether the joints contained lead soda or the brass fittings and so on. So run the water, count to 100, especially for young children. Make sure they learn that. Might be a good idea. Okay, next. For over 20 years now, I've avoided aluminium wherever I possibly can. I don't ever buy a deodorant, underarm deodorant with aluminium in it. I don't have antacids with aluminium in it. My wife and I have avoided aluminium cookware. One thing in particular, avoid those Italian coffee pot things, which are, some of them are made of aluminium. Make sure if you use that technique that you use stainless steel for that. Lastly, I would recommend, and it's not that expensive, to get a hair analysis for your children. Have their hair analyzed to see what their burden of toxic metal is right now. We had a friend who did this. He was living near an incinerator in Springfield, Massachusetts. And one of the things which shocked him and us was the highest metal in that hair analysis for many children was aluminium. Now, it's a possibility with the advent of the incinerator. This is the first time that the ordinary person was exposed to airborne aluminium. Those aluminium cans going into the furnace, it was vaporized. Hitherto, most of the people that were exposed to airborne aluminium were working in aluminium smelters. Now we're all exposed to that, and the problem with aluminium, of course, it's implicated in Alzheimer's disease. And it's interesting, if you look at the history of incineration, it might be interesting to see how they relate, the increase in Alzheimer's disease.
So many words of wisdom have come forth, and I would like to say a few things that relate primarily to water among the comments that have been put forth. And it's mainly because we've been studying water for some years, and we've discovered a phase of water. I don't know how many of you have heard my talk. It's a phase of water that is a crystalline-like phase. And although it was predicted more than 100 years ago, it's only now that we're beginning to realize that this is something real. And not only that it's real, but it's something that fills your body. It's the kind of water that fills your cells. And so the very existence of this phase of water brings to mind new, fresh ideas. Is something been put forth. And it,
know whether they're mercury. They're 50% mercury. So make sure that your kids don't get mercury fillings. Unfortunately, low-income families are forced to have mercury fillings, and avoid the propaganda which says they're safe and effective, etc. Another thing to do with water, simple precautions. Run the water for at least a minute in the morning. Don't drink water that stood in the pipes. You may or may not know whether they are lead pipes somewhere. You may not know whether the joints contained lead soda or the brass fittings and so on. So run the water, count to 100, especially for young children. Young children, make sure they learn that. Might be a good idea. Okay, next. For over 20 years now, I've avoided aluminium wherever I possibly can. I don't ever buy a deodorant, underarm deodorant with aluminium in it. I don't have antacids with aluminium in it. My wife and I have avoided aluminium cookware. One thing in particular, avoid those Italian coffee pot things, which some of them are made of aluminium. Make sure if you use that technique that you use stainless steel for that. Lastly, I would recommend, and it's not that expensive, to get a hair analysis for your children. Have their hair analyzed to see what their burden of toxic metals is right now. We had a friend who did this. He was living near an incinerator in Springfield, Massachusetts. And one of the things that shocked him and us was the highest metal in that hair analysis for many children was aluminium. Now, it's a possibility with the advent of the incinerator. This is the first time that the ordinary person was exposed to airborne aluminium. Those aluminium cans going into the furnace, vaporized. Hitherto, most of the people that were exposed to airborne aluminium were working in aluminium smelters. Now we're all exposed to that, and the problem with aluminium, of course, it's implicated in Alzheimer's disease. And it's interesting, if you look at the history of incineration, it might be interesting to see how they relate, the increase in Alzheimer's disease.
So many words of wisdom have come forth, and I would like to say a few things that relate primarily to water. Among the comments that have been put forth. And it's mainly because we've been studying water for some years, and we've discovered a phase of water. I don't know how many of you have heard my talk. It's a phase of water that is a crystalline-like phase. And although it was predicted more than 100 years ago, it's only now that we're beginning to realize that this is something real. And not only that it's real, but it's something that fills your body. It's the kind of water that fills your cells. And so the very existence of this phase of water brings to mind new.
And one of the things which was shocked him and us was the highest metal in that hair analysis for many children was aluminium. Now, it's a possibility with the advent of the incinerator. This is the first time that the ordinary person was exposed to airborne aluminium. You know, those aluminium cans going into the furnace, it was vaporized. Hitherto, most of the people that were exposed to airborne aluminium were working in aluminium smelters. Now we're all exposed to that, and the problem with aluminium, of course, it's implicated in Alzheimer's disease. And it's interesting to look at the history of incineration. It might be interesting to see how they relate, the increase in Alzheimer's disease.
So many words of wisdom have come forth, and I would like to say a few things that relate primarily to water among the comments that have been put forth. And it's mainly because we've been studying water for some years, and we've discovered a phase of water. I don't know how many of you have heard my talk. It's a phase of water that is a crystalline-like phase. And although it was projected more than 100 years ago, it's only now that we're beginning to realize that this is something real. And not only that it's real, but it's something that fills your body. It's the kind of water that fills your cells. And so the very existence of this phase of water brings to mind new, fresh ideas in terms of what's healthful, what's good for your body, and what to avoid. And so I have a few things on that. And the first is to say, and these stem from some of the comments that we've heard. The first is there are various waters that should be polluted, heavily polluted, really ugly waters that actually turn out to be clean. The first one I heard of is in Russia, in an area called Karelia, which is north of St. Petersburg and near the Finnish border. And there's a lake near there, and the lake is the trees are cut there. There's a sawmill, and you'd expect that the debris from the sawmill would cause great pollution there, but the lake is absolutely pristine and clean. And the question is, how is this possible? It shouldn't be. And the Russians have found that there's a particular kind of mineral called shungite, which actually grows naturally and lines the water. And this shungite, my colleagues who have studied it, actually creates this kind of fourth phase or easy water that we're talking about. And this seems to have a cleansing effect on the water. And we think we know why, but it's not completely clear. And in a couple of other instances where colleagues of mine in different countries, and one is in New Zealand and one is Malaysia, have actually cleaned up the dirtiest of waters using techniques, technologies. They really don't understand how it happens, but it happens, demonstrably happens. So mostly these are machines that put out certain frequencies electromagnetically. And they're different from one another. The groups don't know one another, but the result seems to be the same, that in the polluted waters, and they're deadly, deadly looking and deadly. The machine is put into the water, and over a period of time, like a week or 2 weeks, it cleans. And they really don't understand why it cleans. And it's not completely clear why it cleans, but the point is, the first point is that these are the kinds of technologies that need to be studied, because if they demonstrably clean what is otherwise dirty, then this is something really powerful for humanity. And these are very simple machines. All they do is put out certain frequencies of electromagnetic energy, and voila, it's clean. So this is pretty amazing. I think it has something to do with this phase of water, but it would be more complicated to explain. Another point that comes on my list, which was brought up before, is planting your own garden. And so one way to do that is to go back to Rudolf Steiner and his method of biodynamic farming. We have a garden. We haven't tried it yet, but I've read and met people who have done it, and the results are astonishing. And so, one of the factors involved in so this is gardening without any kind of fertilizer. And I read recently the results of some Californian grape grower who adopted this method. So 0 fertilizer, and the earth is restored by this. And not only is their yield abundant, but also economically it turns out to be quite feasible to do this. So one of the secrets of biodynamic farming, among other seemingly weird-seeming procedures, is to take a pail and to dump just a tiny bit of compost in it, and then swirl it around for 30 minutes in one direction, and then swirl it around for 30 minutes in the other direction. And nobody would dream of doing anything like this, but it seems to work. And it harks back to the studies of water that were done, the classic studies by Victor Schauberger, who was a naturalist, not a scientist, who studied water and studied rivers and saw how the rivers bent and twisted. And he understood that the water that's gone through this is living water, as opposed to water that's just sitting there, which is like this, which is dead water. And the living water is the one that is good for your health. So, and we think that the living water, the one that's gone through vortices, is actually the 4th phase water, which is probably good for your health. It's not, we haven't exhaustively tested it, but your cells are full of this kind of water, and most of us are dehydrated, and if you can replace
Hoy es un buen día para morir.
What the fuck? What is something on this? What the fuck is that? I don't know, this one was better. Can't draw it.